the literal whip and then the figurative whip of economic pressure. If they can't tell the difference between being thrown into prison for your opinions and being snubbed and not invited to tea parties, well, so this English thing, lasts quite a long time. It was only in the 1950s that they changed their laws on homosexuality, which goes a lot of the way to explain, for instance, the Cambridge Four, if you've ever heard of them. The four Cambridge homosexuals who became very distinguished and so on, and were Soviet spies. They were reacting against English society. The French didn't have any laws against homosexuality from the time of the Code Napoleon. And, well, I suppose the English would think that that's what led to French decadence. But anyway, Mill, I would warn you against Mill, because he is the beginning of this turn from liberalism, meaning what it used to mean, and meaning our own point of view, and modern liberalism. Okay, now the roots of liberalism, this is going to be a condensed lecture. The roots of liberalism go back very far in history. And I don't want you to think that liberalism was something that somehow sprung up instantly from the brow of Zeus or whatever. It developed incrementally. And it was always, in the whole history of the evolution of liberalism, an interplay between social reality and thought. Liberalism was not just invented by a string of philosophers. These are philosophers who dealt with what they found in their own society and theorized about it. And in that way, if they were of a certain inclination, they advanced the cause of liberty. Now, there are two things. Now, first of all, liberalism is of the West. In fact, you could say it's of the West, defined as the nations that were or had been at one time in communion with the Bishop of Rome. In other words, Western Central Europe. Some of them, went off and became Protestants, but still, that for hundreds of years, the role of the Catholic Church was very important in their history. So, the liberal idea, I say, goes back very far in Western history. We can find it in what the Romans called Palestine, where the Hebrews came up with the crucial idea that God is totally different and above his creation. No human being can claim to be God. And this the Jews held to forever. This put them in contrast with a lot of civilizations, a lot of great civilizations. The Pharaoh was a god in Egypt. The Persian Shah, king of kings, was a god. The emperor of Japan was the direct descendant of the goddess of the sun. The Chinese emperor was a god. The Jews, on the other hand, had the idea that there's man and then there's God. There are two different things. And man is subservient to God, and no man can set himself up as God. So this began, as we'll see, and I'll mention different aspects of it, this dichotomy, this division, this bipolarity of the Western world as against the monolithic character of a lot of other civilizations. And then with the Greeks, we begin to have the idea of natural law. One of your number, who shall remain nameless, happens to be an expert in ancient Greek literature. So in our question period, if we get to a question period, I obviously will not call on him. Because what I want to mention now is, for instance, the play Antigone by Sophocles, where you have there a conflict between Antigone and Creon, who is the ruler of the city. And it's a great play. You can read it. And at one point, the problem is that Antigone's brother died in rebellion against Creon. So Creon says, well, let him stay outside of the walls and being eaten by dogs and rats. That's what he deserves. Antigone can't accept that. And she says at one point, there is a law that's written in the stars before the world was made. And that's the law that she adheres to, a proper burial for her blood kin. So there, and this developed in different ways among the Greeks and also among the Romans. Cicero has an idea of natural law. This is not individual natural rights so far, but it is a natural law distinct from the government's law. And then finally in Palestine, there appeared one of their prophets that many people considered much more than just a prophet. His exploits are discussed in the first books of the New Testament called the Gospels. And at one point, the Pharisees try to trick Jesus. And they show him a coin with Caesar's picture on it, image on it. And they say, should we pay taxes to Caesar? And Jesus says, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and unto God that which is God's. One of the great liberals of the 19th century was a great historian, Lord Acton. Maybe, well, I don't know if you know his name, but you know one thing that he said, which is that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. This was the lesson that he had gleaned from his historical research. And Acton said that statement by Jesus was the foundation of Western freedom. He was a Catholic. That is perhaps an exaggeration, but there's certainly something to it, because Acton says, because Jesus didn't only say that, he set up an institution which eventually became the most powerful institution in the West to guard that. That is the Catholic Church. Catholic Church, through its history, has through most of its history, has opposed state power, not because it believed in individual rights or the rights of conscience. That's not the point. Because state power infringed on their power. And this is what Acton says. And a kind of balance was achieved over time. Let's have an example here from the early centuries of the Christian era. St. Ambrose was the Bishop of Milan. If you go to Milan, you can still see what they claim are his remains. And he was responsible for the conversion of St. Augustine. Now, at one point, the emperor, who's in Constantinople by this time, I heard there was going to be a plot against me this morning. I didn't know it was going to be so overt and okay. And this is what Ambrose says. At length the command came, deliver up the basilica in Milan. But I reply, it is not lawful for us to deliver it up, nor for your majesty to receive it. By no law can you violate the house of a private man. And do you think that the house of God may be taken away? And he warns him that he's going to, the emperor, by this time the emperor's, this is the decay of the Roman Empire, and the emperor's word was law. There was nothing that the lawyers maintained that there was nothing that could limit the emperor's say-so. But Ambrose stood against it. And this is typical of what often happened in these centuries.